the Drew Sutton Leadership Show, lighting the way with real leaders, real stories, and real impacts. Because when leaders stop growing, the darkness wins. Welcome to another amazing episode of the Drew Sutton Leadership Show. Today, we're going to be answering the question, how do you reinvent your career before your company does? And how do you take control of your future in an AI world in your 30s, 40s, and 50s? To answer that question, we have Stephen Seidel. He's a TEDx speaker, CLIO-winning agency founder, leadership coach, and creator of connection engineering. From microchips to media, he helps people connect the dots in their experience, author their next chapter, and build trust in an AI-driven world. And besides that, he's a dear friend, and I'm super happy to have him on the show. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Stephen.
Thank you so much, Drew.
Hey, man.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to do this and to know you and to be in your community.
Yeah, man. It's been fun. You and I have an alarming level of overlap. I think in a different world, we might be rivals, but you love people, you love technology, you love connecting people, your media agency. I think it's been super fun getting to know you. I think it's almost been 2 years now.
Time flies. And so I've been in Lexington since 2020. And it took me a little while to get my footing. I was during the middle of the pandemic. And so, there weren't too many things open. I had a virtual company, and then eventually I found Awesome Inc. And through Awesome Inc., I found you, and I'm grateful for that.
Well, ditto. I'm super glad you found me as well. We first met through a deck of cards. Now, this show's not about your cards, but I think it's a super profound and appropriate way to start the show. You made a deck of cards called Gent's Journey. Now, I've kind of sprung this on you. Do you happen to have a deck of those cards in front of you?
I do. I was trying to find. I have the original version, but they will serve just as well. It's called the Journey deck, and it was all about. I had an issue not an issue, but I lost my mom, and so it was quite challenging being in a new city, running a virtual company, dealing with a 1-month-old baby, marriage, just at a rough place. So I started a men's group, and we decided that we want to help other men become better versions of themselves. So we created this card deck as a way for men to connect, or anyone for that example. But we were specifically trying to help men.
I love it. And I've been a massive fan of cards ever since I was a kid. I never got into the Pokemon. I was in the wrong phase for that. But cards are an amazing randomization device that allow you to have these deep conversations, remarkably human conversations that we could never have, I think, without the card device. So if I met you at a cocktail party and I'm like, hey man, when was the last time you cried? That would be a wildly inappropriate question for me to randomly ask you just off the cuff, because inherent in there, you might feel like I was setting you up for something. You might not be ready for the conversation. You might have agreed to have that level of a conversation. But the cards are fun because you draw a card and I draw a card. And now we're both victims of the conversation we're about to have, which makes us friends as opposed to potential adversaries. It's a really cool deck, and it sparks remarkably human moments.
There was
a
cool thing that happened. So when I started this, I was in Lexington, and I didn't know a lot of people, and so I went to the Fatherhood Initiative. It's a Lexington leadership.
That's fantastic.
And when we went there, it was really amazing to facilitate this. And these are men who are coming out of rehab. They're incarcerated, people who feel as if they're broken. And we'll touch more upon this later as we reinvent ourselves. We lose something. We're broken. But, they were in a position where they needed to reinvent themselves. So the card was a conduit for them to open themselves up and then to connect on a deeper level so that we can have empathy. And we all shared a really wonderful space together. And so the cards themselves, like you said, if I ask you a question and I look you in the eye and I say, when was the last time you cried? Or what did you want to be when you grew up? You feel as if you're on the spot. But when you have the card, it's in your hand, it's tangible. You have a moment, you can turn it, you can move it around. And it's just a way to have that physicality connect on a much deeper level and get out of your head and deeper into your heart. So, and you allowed me to bring this to a couple of your LinkedIn local events, which is amazing. Would you like to answer one? Or I could answer one as well.
No, I would love to do that. My machine wasn't responding. So fire me a question. So before we get into this, I want to just speak to a second. I realize that if you watch this show, you're like, wait a minute, what is it? Like, I kind of signed up for a businessy thing. What's about to happen? As it turns out, business is about the exchange of goods and services between people. And the
Yes.
better we get at the people game, the more we'll realize that business has lost its function. We called it, it's all about profit. It's not about profit. It's about serving people. And the better you get at people, the better you'll be at business. So fire away.
Yeah, and to add on to that, we talk a lot about connection engineering, but stories are the connective tissue, and in
Hmm.
between these two individuals, these stories are what really keep us at bay. And you look at any movie, there's the hero's journey, a Disney film, they find somebody, a companion, and someone to empathize with them in that moment of loss, in that moment of reinvention. And only then do they have a community or somebody around them, can they, piece things together. And so what I like to say, these cards, I'm a huge magician fan. And so I love cards, much like you. I have a bunch of cards in my hand, but the magic is not in me. The magic is in you and the story that you share. So tell me when to stop.
Stop.
Okay. This is actually a good one. This is a common question, but we put it on here because it's very effective. I'll let you read it.
What's one piece of advice you'd give your younger self and why? Man, this is actually, I listen to audiobooks all the time, like an absurd amount of all the time. And my wife asked me, we were on a date the other day, and she said, "Why do you listen to audiobooks all the time?" And I said, because, or no, she said, "What do you think about when you're not listening to audiobooks?" And I said, about all the mistakes that I've made in life. And she's like, "Oh, that's why you listen to audiobooks all the
That's
time."
amazing.
And so one of the things that I would tell to my younger self, um, there's so many things, would be to focus in on the moment that you're at. I
Sure.
I know it's cliche, right? And there's like all sorts of leadership analogies. You speak, I speak. We all know the stories that you tell. But my classic problem is two things. One is I get hyper focused on what I'm doing right now, and then I ignore what I should be doing right now. So like I've missed multiple family dinners for kind of no reason. I was just kind of working on something. I work in the basement most of the time, so I was working on something, and I could have left and had dinner, but I kind of, now it's 5:30, and I missed the juicy part of dinner with my kids. So I either hyper focus too much, or I worry about like I want to be somewhere in 5 years, and I think about that too much, and I'm hyper focusing, and I'm thinking about the future, and I'm not taking a moment to be really deeply appreciative of the progress that I've made. There's a lady in my life. Her name is Alina Duran. She's out of New York. She's fantastic. And she said to me, she's like, "Drew, you've accomplished so much in the last couple of months." And I was like, "Oh." And she kind of forced me to look backwards and to see the progress that I'd made.
Sure.
I wasn't where I wanted to be because I'm like, I want to be there. But no,
Yeah.
I made a huge amount of progress. And as I've become more grateful for the progress that I've made, it has allowed me to I'm less hyper focused, and I'm more like, "Hey, look, I made good progress. Go have dinner." And
Yeah.
I worked on this for a couple of months. I've made really good progress. Relax. It's okay. You'll get there in 5 years. Just do what you're supposed to do today. That's the advice I'd give myself.
Yeah, I have a similar thing in our men's group. We talk about, you're living in the moment with your children, and these are the good old days, right? Or the
Mm,
moments when they're growing up. And too often we think further or in the past, but one of them mentioned just to simply say, take a moment, breathe it in, just like we did right now. Know that our heart is, beating with, but say, this is nice. It's just a reminder, this is nice. And you simply say that in that moment. Even the fact that we get to go to work, we don't have to go to work. I have a framework for being great, grateful, reflective, empathetic, accountable, and transformational. But just saying this is nice in that moment, I think is really impactful, because too often you're having a great time at Disneyland or even just at home yesterday playing with the kids in the backyard. Saying this is nice, letting them know this is nice. And sometimes I even say, hey, take a moment to remember this. Maybe take a mental picture and you look back on this and hopefully, have fond memories.
yeah. No, I love it, man. I love it. It's so true.
Yeah,
And kids 100% copy who you are, not what you say, right? So when they see
sure,
you taking that beat to appreciate where they're at, then they feel like, oh, that's what you're supposed to do.
sure.
Um,
More is
yeah,
caught than taught. More is caught than taught. Right.
more, yeah,
Yeah. Do as I say, not as I, or do as I do, not as I say. I
yeah,
think there you go.
yeah. Cool. Okay, well, this show is about we're talking about reinventing yourself. Now, I know that you've had quite the journey. I'm not trying to
Sure.
dig into the whole journey,
Hmm.
but this is why I think it's so relevant for today. AI, we just fired 9,000 people from Facebook. I think 20,000 people from Oracle. I think I may be getting those numbers a little bit backwards, but we're living in this world where AI is replacing everything. And all these people that have had very high paying jobs, have had very good jobs, are all of a sudden finding themselves in the market and nobody wants them. I had a friend who's in his late 50s, and he was in charge of AI for a very large company. If I said the company, everybody here would know exactly what I was talking about. And he was in charge of their AI strategy for the last decade.
Hmm.
And they recently let him go. They said, "Hey, listen, man, you've done an amazing job. We don't need you anymore."
Yeah,
And so
that's
it's a
tough.
weird, yeah. And so he's in the middle of reinventing himself. And all of his friends have told him, "Yeah, you're not getting another job," which is true. I think that we needed the experience 30 years ago from 50-year-olds. But now, when you're in your 40s and your 50s, we just focus on AI and the younger generation. So we're at
Sure.
this weird spot where reinventing yourself, I think, is a real conversation. Um, Talk to me about your journey and kind of what you've learned along that way.
Sure. Yeah. There's an interesting stat that is 50% of Americans over 50 report feeling out of step with their career or their calling. And much to like what you were just sharing, our fathers worked, well, my dad worked for Sperry, became Univac, became Unisys. He had one job. We've grown up in this lifestyle where I personally have been afforded the opportunity to be laid off 3 times. And so when one door closes, another one opens, but it has given me the skill set, the resilience, the know how to know that these are opportunities that are opening. And when you're in 50, 60, you're in the back nine, if you will, or, act three of your life, it's a little bit more challenging because you feel like you're looking uphill. And so
Yeah.
when you dig deeper on your purpose, even my agency, we're public relations, but I call it purpose relations.
Mm.
And when we can reconnect to our purpose, it might not be the job that you expect it to be. Obviously, it's going to be different. Things are changing. And so really leaning in on your purpose for myself, like I said, I've probably reinvented myself 6 times. In college, I was an engineer. I worked for Motorola, and then I got laid off. I became a performer. And then after a while, performing didn't work for me. And then I became a marketer. And then I became an agency. And then I started a men's group. So I've started multiple things throughout the course of my career. But I think at the end of the day, like we talk a lot about culture and your connection, as long as you're connected to who you are and who you want to serve, then that's a great place to start. And we don't know exactly where we're going, but having a better understanding of what are your skill sets, you can look at it like a Venn diagram. You can look at your passion, you can look at your skill sets,
Mm.
you can look at your unique positioning and find opportunities. You might not necessarily have the same job, but there are opportunities that you can either create or that you can find if you position yourself accordingly. So it's about the positioning, but we talked about earlier as well, stories are the connective tissue. And when you can really tell a story and can connect with individuals, I think that's where you have an opportunity to reinvent yourself and find what it is that they're seeking, have what it is that you can bring to the table and meet them halfway. And I have a strategy for that, but that's kind of an overarching approach.
I, I love that tease. If you're in the spot where you maybe need to reinvent your story, you should definitely reach out to Stephen.
Yeah.
100% my endorsement on that. No, I love this. This was kind of my advice with my friend. He's a new friend, but he got pushed out of the company. I said, one of the things you have to deal with first is a little bit of the shame of going through a layoff, and then also, who are you outside of this company that you've poured your life into for 15 years, 20 years, 30 years? In his case, I think it was probably about 25 years. And then you have to come up with a story, because I remember a moment. I'm an engineer, right? And I remember a moment where people would talk about story in my life, and I was like, those guys are just namby pambies. Like, that's not like, how you feel about it doesn't matter. You don't need a story. It's just what is and what isn't. But what I've come to realize is, you can tell the story about the time you're on this ship and then it wrecked into the rocks, and then you're like, I guess that's the end of the story. Or it could be the defining moment of the story where you get to reinvent yourself on the island and then grow as a person and go on. Um, when you run into those moments of life, how do you manage that first 5 to 15 minutes of like the gut punch, and then make it past, and then keep going?
Yeah, I think in those moments, like you just mentioned, you feel like the chapter is closing or that's the end of the story, but it may in fact be the beginning of the story. And so you're entering into a new realm. Sometimes I call them anonymous gatekeepers, but as long as you have an intention behind what it is that you're doing, that's where they talk a lot about the GPS and making sure you know where you're wanting to go. We never really know how we're going to get there, But that old
Mm.
story that you have or that you've been telling yourself, a lot of it, like we know, is mental. It's your mindset. So you have the 80-20 rule. 80 or 20% of the actions you do will drive 80% of the results. But making sure that you're aware of that story that you've been telling yourself. And 50 years age, you can go and look at countless stories of people that started their careers at 40, 50, even 60. And so checking yourself right there. There's a voice in our head. There's a story that we're telling ourselves. But then there's also the story that we want to bring to, the workplace. And so you probably have a Rolodex, countless people that you've been working with. So understanding where you're positioning yourself, you're not in crisis. Yes, loss is here, but with loss comes reinvention. And so I have the 3C diagnostic
Mm.
where you're going to want to check in on your calling. Do you know why you're here? Do you have, I have a friend of mine in our men's group. He calls it, are you eating your morning pies? But are you doing something physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual every morning to start your day? You need to start strong and make sure that you're getting up and giving yourself motivation. But the calling really checks off all of those boxes, if you will, but more so on the spiritual aspect of things. Can you say what it is that your calling is? Why are you here? You're now into the stage where it's not what you're doing. It's like, what do you want to be known for? What is that legacy that you're going to leave behind? Because we're all going to leave a legacy behind. And then the second C is the company or the culture you're around. Are you in alignment with that? Are you being authentic with who you truly are? Maybe that job that you had wasn't really who you were. You were just paying the bills. But now you have an opportunity to really dig deep, maybe work with your hands or find other things. Maybe you're an AI specialist like you talked about, and you can work for another firm. But does it match you and your values? It might not. And then lastly, the most important part that I believe in and why we connected, Drew, is community. The Lexington community, too often I had been bouncing around. I worked as an engineer. I was an entertainer, but I never really fully rooted myself where I was at until I came here, because I have 2 children. And I said, look, I'm here for the next 20 years, regardless of what happens. So this community is crucial. And without having a friend, without having a place to play, if you will, so that you have some sense of excitement, or if it's fun, it gets done, you're really going to find yourself in a rough spot. So checking in on your calling, checking in on your company or its culture, and then the community that you surround yourself. And you can sort of take a look at those boxes and see where you're at and decide on where maybe you need to put a little bit more emphasis on.
Yeah. To wax slightly philosophical, I love your C's. When I was in high school, I remember reading Dr. Faust. Maybe it's Dr. Fausto, or anyway, it's the play about the priest who makes a deal with the devil.
Yep.
And Act 2, Scene 1, you're on the street and there's a street urchin, and the devil shows up and he makes an offer to the street urchin and says, "Hey, I want to buy your soul. What do you want for it? What if I gave you a leg of lamb?" And the street urchin says, "Well, it better be very, very good sauce." And that has stuck with me all of my life as what are you selling your soul for? How good is the sauce? And I think a lot of times we find ourselves in a company whose culture doesn't fit us, or maybe they used to fit us, but now the new leadership comes in, it doesn't fit us. Or maybe our life says, we've had this moment where like, this is not where I fit, but we're still handcuffed to that job. And the way that I reframe that for my family and for my teams is, how much am I asking you how much are you sacrificing your calling or your character for? If you could get the same job, let's just use 100,000 because it's a nice round number. If they're paying you 100,000 and you don't want to go to 80, and I understand the massive, 20% hit to your income, I understand that, but are you compromising for that 20%? And so when I've found myself in spots where I've had to take a smaller role for a company that I believed in, I've said, well, that's just the price that I'm paying, right, to keep my calling and my character intact.
Yeah.
And when I reframed it like that, for me, it was super easy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And one of the things, we're at a position right now where we're all extremely connected with technology. So in my men's group, we just did a newsletter about living in the 90s. If you wanted something to get done, you had to do it. We were talking about a mixtape. That was one of the few ways where you could express yourself, right? You're putting it in song. But now I can like it on an Instagram post. I can give you, a text message. I could do an email newsletter. And so we live in this ever connected world. Too often we find ourselves, living on an algorithm or living on AI prompts and not really necessarily watering the seeds of our roots and who we truly are. And so if you are in a position where you get laid off, you don't need to rush back in. I can't speak to your financial situation, but give yourself a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to really take a step back and analyze, like you talked about, where your character is at, or what would be something that would be beneficial. I come from a performance background, and I wanted to take improv classes, so I found a local Lexington company. I think it's Lexington Comedy Company, and myself and a friend, we took improv classes, and it was one of the most invigorating, fun, enjoyable things that we've done, because we got ourselves in a position where we weren't thinking with our head and trying to figure it out and put a square peg into a round hole. We were just reacting and being responsive, but also nurturing these seeds of play and fun and also enjoyment. And so through that class, one of the gentlemen that I work with, he works for an AI startup. He's like, you know what? I think I'm going to start a carpentry company. And so he has since had a love for creating things, wanting to use his hands, and sort of had hit the edge of the road in terms of wanting to do this technological thing and work with AI, and just wanted to create in the comfort of his own home and his own community. So I think there's a lot of value in there of understanding, like you talked about, what are some of these things that you love? I keep a list on my phone. Every time something works for me that I enjoy, I write it down, and I write it down.
That's a great practice.
I have a bunch of things, and it could be anything as simple as eating a slice of strawberry cheesecake, which I had last night, or true crime podcasts. But this will allow you to have a better understanding of the things that really resonate with you, and then you can surround yourself with that, and then you'll start to learn. For somebody looking for a career, there's two options right there. I could go work at the Cheesecake Factory and get free cheesecake every night, or I could see about maybe working for a podcast company or investigating for a newspaper in the missing persons department. But just having that understanding and that awareness will allow you to move and shake and go in different directions.
No, I love that. So I want to shift the conversation, because a lot of folks listening to the podcast either own their own business or are in a leadership position in their business. What are some things that we can do today so that when that inevitable moment comes, and by the way, it's coming, it could happen when you're 40, could happen when you're 50, could happen at 60 or 65 when you want to leave. As I was prepping show notes, one of the lines I wanted to work in was that if you are in your early 50s and you haven't thought about leaving your company, I assure you that your management team and your HR department have thought about it for you. So
absolutely.
So what do we need to do now? When I was chief at this company, and when I was leading a team, I would sell young people. I'd say, listen, I got a career map for you. You don't need to worry about it. You just come and work for me, and I will give you as low a price as you'll take and a steady 2% raise from here on out. And I'll slowly reduce your healthcare costs and vacation benefits as much as you'll take, and then ask you to work free overtime occasionally. Well, I didn't say that last part, but that's what I sold them I sold them a career path where they wouldn't have to worry about it. And then with the back end, knowing that I could fire them whenever I wanted to. So if you're sitting here at a large corporation, that's the value proposition. That golden handcuffs are gone. There is no such thing as a pension anymore. They can fire you whenever they want to without 2 weeks of notice. What should you be doing today so that your team, so that you yourself can be ready? So I was thinking in the context of if you're a leader, so your team, anyway.
Absolutely.
Over to you.
I think at first and foremost, from a PR perspective, we are a public purpose relations company, as I mentioned earlier. We want to have a crisis plan. You want to think about what would happen should you lose your job, and so this is where we're starting right now. Do you have enough in the bank, for your bills, 3 months, and all of that? That's all, clerical or clinical or whatever the term might be on that. But from a perspective of you and what the next step is as you reinvent yourself. Ask yourself, what do I know that is true that I haven't said out loud? What story have I not told publicly, or what story am I truly holding? What do people come and ask me for when it's not really my job? So just start to take an inventory. And that's where that little note that I talked about the things that you love. Start taking inventory about things that you do enjoy and what you spend your time on. Where are you spending that time on a regular basis? And then go a little bit deeper and start asking yourself why, but then go to the flip side on that. What scares yourself? What are you afraid to claim about yourself? Maybe something that's happened in the past. And that may unlock something, because life is short. You get to a point where you're going to want to put your foot down and say, look, this is me. And this is ultimately, as we grow older and we have wisdom, we understand that it's not, what people think about you. I'm a recovering people pleaser. I've thought that a lot in my life. For me, I grew up around doctors, and I also often had T-tubes. I've had 70-year surgeries, and I developed white lab coat syndrome. I was very afraid of doctors. I'm still very afraid of doctors. I go to the UK, I see Dr. Nathan Cass. He's one of the best ear surgeons in the nation, but I am extremely afraid of going to doctors. And it turns out later on in life, I started working in medical aesthetics. So once I was able to address that and call it and give it a name, it allowed me to deal with it better. And it actually opened up an opportunity. But I have something in our business where we call the signal gap. And it's like we want to close the gap between who you are and how you're being experienced. And so
Mm.
sometimes in these firms, like you talked about, we're being labeled as the AI guy, or we're giving a label. That's not truly who we are. And so what I would suggest is to write one sentence about the real story that you haven't told about yourself. And then secondly, I did this with one of my own coaches, and you've probably done it as well, Drew, is, write a blog entry a year later about where you envision yourself. So you just need
Oh,
to
that's
put that
good.
in practice and start thinking about where you would like to see yourself. And then start thinking about what are some goals that I would like to accomplish. Obviously, you're going to have your SMART goals and your stretch goals, but you're at a position where we can create things in this world and they happen. People can become actors. People become president. They wanted these dreams to come true. They became true. So write the sentence down about a story you haven't told. That can be your reinvention starting point, but then write the blog entry. And then you can write some goals that are positioned in and around that, and then work backwards and reverse engineer.
I love it. I love it. That's another one of those things that I, as the linear thinker, didn't really believe years ago. And then I said, well, I'll just try it out. So I have a couple of different hobbies. This was one of my more explosive hobbies. And so I just wrote down, this is the ideal thing that I want to be able to do. This is, I like to shoot guns is what it comes down to. There's a group called IDPA where you just like shoot steel targets. It's a hoot. And
Nice.
I was like, this is how fast I want to be able to shoot. And this is the gun that I want to have. And this is the accessories that I want to have for it. And at that time I was like, I can't afford this. And I don't have the time to practice for this. And I think I was like 3 or 4 years ago. And I was stunned how quickly opportunities to improve all of a sudden popped up because
Wow.
as an engineer, I still don't really know how it works, but writing stuff down is
It's
pretty
crazy.
magical. It's
Jim
pretty
Carrey,
magical.
I mean, you look at him, he wrote it down. He had a bike that showed up in his living room. He did the $1 million check. And so it allows you to hold yourself accountable. It conspires for God, the universe, whatever you believe in, to help that become a thing. So another simple way to start showing up, it's all about showing up, right? And we fail forward. But one way is to put some thought around, ultimately, I help X do Y, so that's Z. So I help, who do you help? What are you helping them with? And what is ultimately the outcome? So for me, I'm Stephen Seidel. I help leaders close the gap between who they are and how they're experienced so that they can build with conviction and connect on a deeper level. And so if you just start to think about that and start saying that out loud, you're going to start running into people. I just had a podcast recently with one gentleman. I said, what do you want to happen as your ultimate goal? He said, I want Magic Johnson to be on my podcast. I'm like, okay, great. We can work with that.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, somebody's going to know Magic Johnson, or you can write him a letter. But if you can get clear on ultimately what you want and what you're doing, then people can conspire for your success. They can make introductions. And that's where you can go back through your LinkedIn, which is the modern day Rolodex, or even on local networking. You go to LinkedIn Local if you're in Lexington or wherever you're headed to, Startup Cincy, you can start to share a little bit more about your background. But you need to continue to get out there and believe in yourself and know that you're enough. There's a quote that I say, to the world, you might be one person, but to one person, you might be the world. And that's where your story can really inspire millions, especially if you've had it rough. If you watch America's Got Talent, our favorite show,
Yeah.
it's a great family show. But when you watch, there's people who are really skilled at what they do and they don't have story. And you're like, oh, they were pretty good. But then if there's somebody who comes up there, he has one leg, or they were homeless, or they lived through adversity, and they're really good at what they do, then you're really digging deeper on what they are and putting your, voting for them and wanting them to succeed. So understanding your story, sharing that story of adversity, and then getting clear on where you ultimately want to land, and then being open to the possibilities.
I love this. So when we started architecting the show, you had this thing called connection engineering, which obviously I love as an engineer. But talk to us about how that helps you reinvent yourself, and really what is connection engineering. As I've said for years now, we're more connected than we've ever been as a human species, and we're about to fall off an AI trust cliff because AI is the robocalling of LinkedIn. It's the robocalling of social media. And so we're not going to be able to tell who's real anymore. And human connection is I'm actually really excited because we're going to come back to human connection, which makes me really excited. We're going to first go up this AI trust cliff. We're going to have a crisis. We're all going to stop believing anything that anybody says, and it's going to fall back to who you know. So talk to me about connection engineering.
Yeah, thank you for asking. And so for me, I was an engineer. I worked in industrial engineering. And so when I went into engineering, and you're an engineer as well, I knew that I was more of a people person than I was chemical engineering or mechanical engineering and getting into the nuts and bolts of how things worked. But at the end of the day, like you said, it's all about trust. Trust is the currency, but connection, from a connection engineering perspective, connection is the currency. So how can you connect, like I said earlier, to your calling? How can you connect to your community? How can you connect to your customer? That's what we call, in a business perspective, a win-win-win. So everything that we're doing, we want to connect to that, but showing up and seeing them face to face, eye to eye, heart to heart is really where that's at. And so I talked earlier about the signal gap, discovering the difference between who you are and how you're being experienced, and then showing up as how you truly want to be experienced and starting to leave that legacy. And then the second component, whether you're a businessman or just yourself, I have the 4M philosophy. So it starts with your mission, it gets into your message, then goes into your media, and then goes into building a movement. And so with AI, we have to be authentic. We need to show up. People need to see our faces. People need to shake our hands. And so the more that you can show your unique sensibilities and your unique perspective and your point of view and those stories, that's where truly we need to lean in, or those connective tissues. And they need to be personal to you, because Claude, ChatGPT, whatever it might be, they can come up with various scenarios, but they can't get into where the nuts and bolts really lie. The fact that you used to love to eat Rocky Road with your dad when you were younger and watch Saturday Night Live in the basement, and that's why you wanted to be on Saturday Night Live. That was me. And so that was my dream as a kid, was to be on Saturday Night Live, because I got to go to my dad's house. I was a product of a divorce relationship. And that's when I got to just go downstairs, watch TV to however late I wanted to. And my dad honored that in me. And I learned comedy, and I learned connection. And so to go to the mission really quickly, it's the 4M process. What are you here on this earth to do? Not your job title, your why. That's like Simon Sinek. The message. What's the one sentence that people should remember? Not your elevator pitch, but the thing that sticks. What's the one thing that people forget that they should remember about you and what you do or your company? And then the media is like, where does that story need to live? Is it LinkedIn? Yes, it is LinkedIn if you're an entrepreneur or a founder. Is it podcast? Yes, it is. Is it Instagram, Facebook? Maybe. Is it TikTok? Maybe. And then lastly, movement. Who are you trying to bring together? Because if you can create movement with feelings, with emotions, with content, that's how it really sticks, because people can vote with their dollar, they can vote with their clicks, and they can vote with their time, because there is a lot of things that are coming at us between notifications and content. So you need to be consistent in and around that story, starting with your mission, then your message, the media, and then ultimately bringing people together beyond you and your client, bringing them together and being of service.
I love it. I love it. Mission, message, media, and movement. I got to be honest, as a solopreneur, I've run big teams, I've run small teams. None of that sounds like work that I do on a day-to-day basis, right? I sell pencils, or I sell weaponry, or I sell cars or EVs, or water bottles. You need somebody like you who's very good at those things and that can help you think through that strategy. Tell me about a client that you've helped with these 4Ms and how they went from struggling to being galvanized and able to really start accomplishing the mission that they're on.
Yeah, that's great. We're one of my favorite clients. His name's Darren Spicer. I talk about him all the time. I talked about him in my TEDx conversation. My TEDx was, how to use grief to your advantage, but the hidden power of grief. But Darren Spicer, I met him because I started my agency in aesthetic medicine. My best friend, again, going back to the connection piece, he knew who I was. He knew what I was able to deliver. He said, look, we're starting this new company. We need somebody to help us tell our story. So that's how my agency got started 10 years ago. And so while I was at the agency, I worked in aesthetics medicine. And I said, look, I only want to work with clients that want to do good. So our slogan is do good, give back, make an impact. And if you work for something greater than yourself, I feel like the results are going to come back. So I started working for this company. I met Darren. Darren was working for an aesthetics company where it was like a scar removal patch. I can't remember the name of it, but it was similar to Mederma when you get cut, and it just wasn't fulfilling. And he had loved coffee for so long, and he tried to apply to become a Dutch Brothers franchise owner, and
Okay.
they pulled it out from underneath him last minute. And they're like, "Look, we're not going to
Oh,
do franchises anymore."
that's
He was like,
frustrating.
he was super bummed, and he was at a position, going back to what we talked about before with reinvention. You're going to lose something, a thing, an experience, a person, a job, you name it. But he had lost that opportunity. And so we were talking, and he said, "Look, I think I'm going to create my own." And I said, "And you rightfully should." And so he dug into the mission, and then we got clear on the message. And then he started with one location, and he found the Carolinas, North and South Carolina, were a great place for drive-through coffee establishments. And he created the 3C philosophy. It was about the culture, which I know you believe in. It
Oh
was
yeah.
about the customer, and then it was also about the community. And those were the three things, the power of three, that he was going to lean in on and make this one of the most memorable experiences when somebody drove through to get a cup of coffee, but it would be much larger than that. And so he built Clutch Coffee Bar from one location. I was their coach, and then public relations firm. We got it all the way to 20 locations. And flash forward 5 years later, guess who bought the company? Dutch Brothers. So the company that did not allow him to create the franchise and inspired his love around coffee ultimately
Nice.
acquired his company for $20 million 5 years later. And so it just speaks volume to really leaning in on what you love, what you want to do. Much like people listening to this, you might be 40, 50, 60. It doesn't mean that there's not enough time. It just means that it's ready for a new pivot. You know, you look at startups, you're going to have to pivot and see what works. And so that's where we started with this mission. We worked to get very clear on what the message was, and then we put him out on media, podcasts. He was an entrepreneur. He became QSR's top 40 top 40 of 40 fast casuals in 2024. So this type of recognition and knowing who you are really gets you to where you need to be. And then he created a movement around his brand so much so that people who loved Clutch Coffee Bar, when they went and got acquired by Dutch Brothers, we needed to make sure that they were still getting their rewards, their benefits. And we actually built we call it the franchise launch package. Because of him, it allowed us to find a way to really dig deep and help franchises grow.
I love it. I love it. We are running out of time on the show here. I just want to tell everybody, listen, if you do, I've done something weird with there we go. There,
we were on stage. Better. We're always on stage.
We are on the
world is the stage.
If you're listening to this and you're saying to yourself, listen, I need to take this AI shift seriously. AI is causing literally tens of thousands of jobs to change hands. White collar jobs, blue collar jobs, they're going away and AI is taking them over. If that scares you, and it should, you need to start taking the human connection element of life seriously. And there's very few people on this earth that understand it as well as Stephen does. So reach out to Stephen and say, hey, listen, how do I take my passion and start prepping myself so that this outsized risk of losing my job or of pushing my small company, how do I get my hands around that? Reach out to Stephen. Tell him you saw him on the Drew Sutton Leadership Show. He's got a really cool thing here. I want you to talk for just a second about the Seidel media page. What's this giveaway?
Sure. So my agency is the Seidel Agency, and that's SEIDEL agency.com. And we have a free handout for you. And so as you begin this next step in life and you have that list of things that you love or the passion or the purpose that you're wanting to build around, it's important that you work that and you really fine tune that message and that narrative around it so that you can showcase why you are the expert. Everybody is an expert in something. The world, is already taken up by tons of different people. You're uniquely you. So leaning in on that is what's really going to help you in the long run. And so at the SeidelAgency.com/media, we have a one sheet. It has 4 different sites where you can get inbound queries from journalists that are looking for experts so that you can fine tune what it is that you're doing. Or if you're at a position and you already know what it is that you're building, you can begin to get visibility, you can get placement, and then start to cement yourself as the authority so that people can come to you and they can trust you and then start to hire you. Especially in the age of AI, it's that recognition that's going to matter most. And there's also another podcast platform on there that can get you booked on countless podcasts. I did it myself and I got booked in probably 10 podcasts in the first month. Not this one because Drew is just so grateful to allow me to come on this one, but definitely check out that one sheet. Because in the age of AI, your authority is what's going to matter most, and that human connection that you have with your audience, with your community and your customers is really crucial to the livelihood of your company and your business.
I love it. I love it. Well, with that, go check out Stephen at in LinkedIn. It's Stephen Seidel on LinkedIn. I've already put this in the comments. If you want that free gift, go to the SeidelAgency.com/media. Tell him you saw him on the Drew Sutton Leadership Show. Start engineering your connection strategy so that you as a leader, you show up the way that you want to be seen. And with that, we are out.